one thing I always try to make, all of you out there in, in YouTube land aware of, especially when we're talking about this, is trade deals. Trade deals outside probably like any non-EU country are big, big politics. Like we're talking really big politics. It can lose or win parties' elections by supporting, not supporting, um, being tougher, being lighter, getting things. It's big politics. It really, really is. And we have not really experienced the ups and downs and, of course, the consequences of signing trade deals. Well, officially today, that all ends. Because today, on Wednesday, the 31st of May, I just double check it was May then, May of 2023, that officially ends as the Australian and New Zealand trade deals come into effect as of midnight last night. And what was the first thing we sent? It was a signed copy of the Beano. Something tells me I don't think the Australians are really that hard up for entertainment that they have to import the Beano from the UK, especially as they can get it online. Just... but of course, the big consequence of this is going to be for farmers, and probably will have other consequences as well, as I've highly suspected before. And of course, you've got the Canadian and, of course, the Mexican trade deals, which George Eustace, not a very happy boy about, potentially looking at leading a rebellion over. There are big questions to be asked about these trade deals. This is why they have. This is why specifically they have not been put before Parliament so they can be scrutinised. And yet, we were told during Brexit, all the Brexiteers were glad to tell us that Brexit was all about trade and we'd be able to finally get all this scrutiny on these trade deals to set up these trade deals would be the best for the UK. Like I say, trade deals are massive, massive when it comes to politics, and we are about to see just what kind of consequences these types of trade deals do have on every other country around the world. So let's get into this, because the shadow Labour trade minister had a lot to say about this. So, as always, before we do go getting into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And of course, there is the YouTube thank you button, and of course, the Pony Club down below as well. So, let's go on with this. This comes from the Mirror, with the title of Boris Johnson's post-Brexit trade deals savaged as they finally come into force. Shadow International Trade Secretary Nick Thomas Salmons has written a letter to the government urging ministers, raising his concerns over the mess of a trade deal. So Boris Johnson signed an agreement in broad terms for a free trade deal with Australia back in 2021. But Labour has savaged the mess of the UK's first Brexit trade deals, which came into force today. In a stark warning, the Shadow International Trade Secretary Nick Thomas Salmons urged ministers to step up support for exporters. The Labour MP has written to the Business and Trade Secretary Kimmy Badenoch about the significant concerns raised by the Australian and New Zealand free trade agreements. Bear in mind, I think this is not the last time we're going to hear about these agreements. I have said these trade agreements would always have, consequences that we knew. The farming one is a pretty obvious one, but it's going to have other unintended consequences as well. It will absolutely have other unintended consequences. And then, as I said before, this becomes big politics. And if you thought leaving the EU is bad, or you're a Brexiteer and you come to hate these trade deals, well, good luck trying to get Australia to renegotiate this trade deal. because it's got no reason to. Once you sign that trade deal, unless you decide to just completely tear it up, you ain't getting out of it. And of course, even then, there are consequences for doing that. So, so he told her, "This is in the hands of your government to act now." The Labour frontbencher has highlighted the warnings that have been raised by British farmers who say this deal will heap further pressure on them. When it comes to agriculture, it appears the Australians have achieved all they have asked for, and British farmers are left wondering what meaningful benefits have been secured for them. As the National Farmers Union told a parliamentary inquiry into the Australian agreement, they said, "There has been little in this deal to benefit British farmers. This will just heap further pressure on British farm businesses already facing serious challenges." And they are right. If you remember when we first originally started covering this with a report from I think it was the Sydney Herald, we went over where you had the Australian negotiators saying, "Yeah, we couldn't believe it. We just asked for stuff and they gave it to us." So the Shadow International Trade Secretary, Nick Thomas Simons, has highlighted these warnings that have also been raised by British farmers in his letter to the government. George Eustace, who was also a minister who helped negotiate these trade deals with Australia, has even admitted that it was not actually a very good deal for the UK, as it gave away far too much for far too little in return. The former environmental secretary said that the UK did not actually need to give Australia nor New Zealand this full liberalisation in beef and sheep, as it was not in our economic interest to do so. From Wednesday, the tariffs on all UK goods exported to Australia and New Zealand will be removed and red tape slashed for digital trade and work visas. Let me tell you, someone who works in sort of the digital side of things, why would I work with someone in Australia? Currently now in Australia, they are asleep. There's almost no point me working with someone in Australia because if I send them an email, it won't be until maybe the late in the evening. Likelihood that it will be like 5, maybe 6, 7 o'clock. The idea of sort of working with someone in Australia from a digital standpoint, it's not going to be the most reactive. It's not going to be the most attractive option. Why would I want to work with someone in Australia? Even though, oh, benefit, they pay me money, etc., etc. It's not really that attractive once you actually start looking into the actual logistics of what it would be like to work digitally for someone in Australia. um, So the British goods, of course, from across the country, including Beano Comics, Perroding Single Malt Welsh Whiskey, Brighton Gin, and the Cambridge Satchel Co. company bags are amongst the first to be shipped under these new agreements. Ministers say that young Britons will also benefit from the opportunities in Australia under the shared youth mobility and working holiday maker visa schemes. Mr. Thomas Salmon said that Conservatives have made a mess of the trade negotiations with Australia, and that is the assessment of their own ministers who did the negotiating. Exports to Australia are falling. Based on their latest status, we knew that this trade deal has a huge risk for our farmers who fear that businesses will be left really struggling. Get this wrong, and the Australian trade deal risks the worst of all worlds for UK businesses. However, Kimmy Badenoch said that it was a historic day for the first post-Brexit trade deals to come into effect. That is why the government needs to get a grip on its work and partnership with the businesses to grasp any trade opportunities in Australia and New Zealand. The OBR predicts the UK exports will fall by 6.6% in 2023, with a hit of over £51 billion. That is a lot of money. A lot of money. And that is money that we are not taking in from tax revenue, all kind of stuff. This is why, for all the talk of Brexiteers saying how important trade deals were, they weren't. They really never actually talked about the technical aspects, the size of the trade deals, all that stuff that they apparently hated under the EU, but are glad to just give away for nothing. But he continued to say, "We cannot go on like this. That is why the Labour government will have a mission to deliver the highest sustained growth in the G7. Plans for this will include boosting green exports and targeting better trade with key allies like Australia and New Zealand." I would say Australia and New Zealand aren't really sort of key trade allies. Um, Europe is, still is, it ain't going anywhere. That is the one you need to fix. And the only way you really fix that is if you align with EU standards and regulations. And at that point, well, why aren't we in the single market customs union? Once you go back into that, or you start asking that questions, you end up on that trajectory. Once you're in that, well, why aren't we full EU members? Brexit at that point is done. We already know it's done. The game is up at this point. And to be honest, I really do not think it will be too long before Labour get into government and go, well, actually, this was a whole complete mess. Why not just undo it? And like I said, I've said before, if the Labour government wants to rejoin the single market and customs union, given the fact that Kimmy Badenoch has said that we do not need to host a referendum on joining a trade bloc, well, then we can just rejoin the single market and customs union, no questions asked. We don't need a referendum at that point. So Sue Davis, the head of the Consumer Rights and Food Protection Policy at Which, said that the success of trade deal agreements will be judged on what they deliver for ordinary people in their everyday lives, not just the export opportunities that they will provide. The government must use these trade deals to strengthen consumer rights and protections when buying goods and services from Australia and New Zealand, and ensure that none of our current standards are weakened, especially around food, as this is a key aspect of both agreements. Ms. Badenoch has said that this is a historic moment as these first trade deals negotiated of post-Brexit have come into effect. The businesses up and down the country will now be able to reap the rewards of our status as an independent trading nation and seize these new opportunities, driving economic growth, innovation, and higher wages. Except, as we've said before, most of these businesses that come and trade in the EU specifically have been cut off from their main market. We have seen exports fall because of that. We are seeing small to medium-sized businesses just give up on exporting altogether. Doesn't matter that you've done these trade deals with Australia and New Zealand, because Australia and New Zealand are halfway around the world. Distance in trade is still a thing. So watch out, because I will make this prediction now. Trade deals are once again going to become a big thing in British politics. Why? Because they are the exact same thing in any other country around the world. It's big politics. And we were, to be honest, had a lot of protection, a lot of advantages being part of the EU, being part of a massive sort of trade bloc that could use its economic strength to get good trade deals. We ain't part of that anymore. But again, Brexit was all about trade. It was all about this. And yet this Australia-New Zealand trade deal, absolutely useless. George Eustace, yeah, not even very economical benefit to the UK. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.